If you're traveling to and from the game, if you're having a pregame or a postgame news conference, you had to dress in a business casual manner. Well, the problem is that they made that list, and what did people say about that list? They said that this is targeting whom? The black players. And the black players are what, 80, 85%, 75, I forget the exact number, but it's a predominantly, obviously, a predominant black majority of players in the NBA. And Paul Pierce and some of these other guys got really upset about this. They said this was discriminatory because of the list that they made. Did the NBA get in any trouble over this? How did it resolve? Go ahead. Clothing companies stepped in and they began to pay them. They gave them clothes and they paid them to wear the clothes, and then all of a sudden everybody started to win on this deal, so the NBA got lucky. Had the NBA just given a dress code of what you're supposed to wear and left off the stuff, the list that you weren't supposed to wear, this would have been far, far less controversial. No ifs, no ands, no buts about it. And if you want to see an example of the before dress code, Allen Iverson is a really good example. If you want to see an example of the after dress code, Chris Paul was a good example. And you don't have to watch the whole interview, but you can get a sense of how the guys dressed. You remember the Titans, what that one was? Go ahead.
There's a white kid from California came to... Sunshine came from California to Virginia, right?
Yeah.
And they tried to go into a restaurant that was, I think it was a white restaurant with two African-American players.
Segregated restaurant in Alexandria, Virginia, yeah. And ultimately, you know, there were some problems there. Do you remember the article that was dealing with Jim Crow? Do you remember some of the laws that dealt with Jim Crow? Because I gave you some sample laws. Go back and take a look at that. Remember, you could segregate, but you had to have a wall, so basically nobody would be able to see or know that there were people on the other side, and there had to be separate entrances to the establishment. There was stuff in there about textbooks and shooting pool and playing baseball and of course, interracial relationships. I mean, there were a lot of them, so maybe be comfortable with some of those. And then, of course, Hidden Figures was dealing with what? The bathrooms. And if you remember that poor woman, not just the bathrooms, but the coffee pot as well in there when she has that really kind of a breakdown thing. We talked about there's the Jim Crow one. And the thing that I haven't added in here, and I've got it scanned, I just haven't added, is Justice the Horse. You remember Justice the Horse? The one, and of course in your class, Matthew just totally lost it about animal rights. Nobody else lost it like Matthew, but with that in mind, make sure that you look up Justice the Horse, because it'll be a two-parter in there, and it's the first time I've used that article. Just to go back to the terms really, really quick, anything else that jumps out up here? You had asked before what was considered the worst case. Dred Scott was the one that was considered the worst case in American history, probably for two reasons. One, because it led to the Civil War. Two, they specifically said that Dred Scott, a slave, could not sue because he was not a man, but rather he was property, which is why, like saying a horse could sue in court, and that's part of the reason why Justice the Horse ended up losing. Ryan, I think I had seen your hand.
Well, no, you answered my question. I was going to ask you, did they view him as property? You answered my question.
That's what it was. Brown was the one where they struck down the segregated schools, and I think y'all kind of gloss over this, but what was the story of the 1964 Civil Rights Act?
They put women on there as a joke, and then it got bad.
Yeah, the Virginia representative threw gender on there, so it was race, color, religion, national origin. He was like, well, if we're going to protect all these other things, let's just give women rights too. And if you remember on this, he did amend it so that it would be defeated, but then when it passed and it was protected just like all the others. Ladies, y'all got rights 50 years ago almost as a joke. Y'all remember the doll test? The doll test.
Oh, yeah.
Go ahead, do it.
They did like a white doll and a black doll.
Yeah.
Asked the white kids which one is better and which one looks like them, and they asked the black kids which one's better and which one looks like them, and the white kid said the white baby and the black kid said the white baby.
Yeah, you're really, really close. In the Brown versus Board of Education case, they use sociological evidence, and sometimes the sociological evidence is some of the simplest, and the doll test was a big part of this. So they would invite the kids in, and they would ask the white kids with a white and black doll there, they would ask them, which doll are you? And the white kids would point at the white doll. Which doll do you want to be? And the white kids would point at the white doll. When they asked the black kids, which doll are you? They pointed at the black doll. But when they asked them which one they wanted to be, they pointed at the white doll. And in the court's opinion in Brown versus Board, remember what they said? These kids are getting stamped with a badge